I think it's on.
And we're back. Round 3. Trying this again. Can somebody build a new platform that makes these kinds of conversations easier to do? Is it just me, or just like every IG live is just so frustrating? Okay, we're going live with Marisa Renee Lee right now. And thank you for coming back. For those of you who were already here with us, hi Marisa. Woo. I feel like
Oh,
we need to do
Lord.
like a prayer to just
Something.
like invite God to override the Instagram gods that keep trying to
Shut us
shut us
down.
down.
Yeah, I can't. Oh my God.
You
Oh
know,
my
I almost
God.
gave up, but I'm not doing this. We're not giving up
No,
today.
no, absolutely not.
It would go
Absolutely not.
against you would go against everything that we're here to talk about.
This is fantastic. Okay, so first of all, I have to tell you something that I've never told you that
Oh
I
my
feel like
God.
folks will appreciate. Yes, wait for it. So, I left My Brother's Keeper, the nonprofit, and sort of Obama land in 2017 and started my own consulting firm, which is how we connected with 15% pledge and all of that work. And I wrote down a wish list of clients, and at the time, you were still at Teen Vogue as editor in chief, doing this amazing work. And you were on that list. Like at some point, I'll go through old journals and notebooks and I'll find it and I'll take a picture and I'll send it to you so I'm not full of shit. But I was like, this is somebody who I need to be friends with. Like, obviously, she doesn't know me, but my friends who are in the comments right now, they know, like, I make these decisions about people and then that's it. So here we are.
That is the sweetest thing. And also the universe conspires in your favor when you write things down and when you manifest them. It's really crazy
Yes.
the way, the ways things like this come together. But I'm like not surprised, because you are a very intentional person, and
Thank
the
you.
way that you move through the world is like you kind of call in, I think, what it is that you're trying to manifest. And I'm just honored that I was on that list. And shout out to Aurora for being the conduit that brought us together, and the 15% pledge. But I don't know. I mean, you were telling so for those of you guys who are just joining us for the first time, this is literally our third attempt to try to have this conversation. We keep getting cut off. So thank you guys for tuning back in. But we are here to have a conversation about grief. Marisa is a grief advocate. She is writing a book called Grief is Love. I want to have her share her story with you guys. And I think she's just a well of wisdom and knowledge and tools around this topic. And I do feel the need to sort of frame the conversation a little bit, because when we talk about grief, or when we say grief, sometimes people think, oh, we're just talking about the aftermath after experiencing death, the death of someone we love. But we're talking about and what we're experiencing collectively as a culture, as a community right now, what we're experiencing is loss. And loss looks a lot of different ways. So just wanted to share that up front, because for some of you guys, you are dealing with the death of a loved one. For some of you, you're dealing with the loss of a job or a career path that maybe no longer seems viable in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. And for some of you, you're experiencing loss on a deeper kind of racial trauma level because of everything that we're witnessing right now coming up. So this is for everybody. This is for everybody. And it's a place for us to just kind of share what we're going through, share what we're feeling. We are all on an emotional roller coaster together. And so anyway, enough with that. I just wanted to make sure people knew what we were here talking about. But Marisa, first of all, you're brilliant. You're beautiful. Your smile just makes me feel better. So selfishly, I just wanted to jump on here just so I could look at your smile. But I also wanted to share you with all my people, Tell them about yourself. Tell them about your book and what led you to this work.
Yeah. So what led me to this work? Next month is 13 years since I lost my mom. When I was a kid, she got sick when I was 13, and it took them a while to figure it out, but eventually they realized she had multiple sclerosis. And then the week that I was graduating from college, she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. So I spent a lot of my younger years, teens, early 20s, being a part of my mom's caretaking team. And then 2.5 years after her diagnosis, she passed away. And I had just turned 25. I thought I was an adult. Turns out you are not an adult at 25. I'll be 38 next week. I'm still not an adult. And I just I didn't know what grief was. I did all this research. I am a list person. You said I try to be very intentional. I had a spreadsheet preparing for my mom to die, everything from the funeral arrangements to what to do with various pieces of jewelry and items of clothing. But I didn't realize that you can't prepare for grief, because grief actually isn't, even when we're talking about grief connected to death, it is not just for that time right after someone dies. We need to redefine grief. And I think this is really important because, at this point, we've lost almost 400,000 Americans to the coronavirus. So there are millions of Americans grieving right now. And I view grief at this point in my life and in my journey as the repeated experience of learning how to live with a significant loss. So I say repeated as a very important word because, what my grief looked like 12 years ago is very different from what it looks like now, but it still shows up and creeps in these unexpected ways and kind of punches you in the face. And so figuring out what you do with all of those emotions, and also how you integrate the person that you lost into your life for the long term, is what it's really all about. And so, I started learning those things, the first decade of loss that I experienced with my mom. And then I also experienced infertility, and summer of 2019, we experienced a pregnancy loss, and that just brought all of the mom stuff up all over again. This kind of combination of motherlessness and the inability to become a mother was really hard. And so I started thinking about grief in this longer term way. And then, a couple months later, we find ourselves in the middle of a pandemic. And now I'm thinking about grief as this, this global experience that we're all dealing with. It's everything, like you said, from losing a job, losing childcare options for your kids, and trying to be a full-time parent and a full-time employee, which pretty sure that's impossible. I don't have kids, but that seems terrible. Losing your sense of community, being stuck at home where you're supposed to be, but it's really hard on some people. And even just losing your routine and your sense of normalcy. There is a lot to grieve. And then we also have, on top of all of that, this moment of racial reckoning that we're in. I know you are a Black woman, you are married to a Black man. This year, while there were some incredibly horrific things that happened, you know racism, white supremacy. There was no way for you to move through the world pre-2020 without the knowledge of those things. But I think there was something about, the heaviness of the pandemic, plus this recognition that now more people have of just how hard it is to be Black in America, that adds a whole other layer of grief. I mean, it's a fucking mess.
It's a trigger fest.
Yeah.
We are living in America is a trigger fest right now. It's interesting because as I mentioned, we met in a state of sort of racial trauma, coming up when we were working together on the 15% pledge earlier this summer after the murder of George Floyd. And there were some very specific waves of emotion that I was feeling during that time that were intense and different than anything that I had experienced before. And I didn't really have a language for what was happening. And working on the 15% pledge was a productive outlet for me. And I'm
Yeah.
sure for you and for the whole team. And then, flash forward to the first week of January 2021, watching those scenes play out at the Capitol, on the news, on the internet, it was like all of those feelings that I thought had subsided. Like I thought I had worked through them. Like I thought the work we did with 15% pledge of, the therapy that I had done, and, the conversations and the time and
Yeah.
I'm telling you, like that.
Yeah.
It came back up again, and I felt, and now I for some of you all know, I started a new job that puts me on live television, national television, in front of an audience that is largely conservative, that is not my echo chamber. Every day now I have to present, and I feel this responsibility to speak for us. And but also I'm human, and I have a lot. I was feeling so emotionally raw. I thought, how the heck am I going to go on national TV and succinctly represent?
And I will just say, just you having to do that and being in that position, like that's another burden.
It is, and it's one that I carry with pride. Like, it's one that I don't take for granted, but it's something that I just wasn't really fully prepared for. And then, so we're all in our little silos, feeling the weight of what's happening politically, of what's happening racially, of what's happening personally for us. You talked a little bit about the loss you've experienced with your mother, and with not being able to carry your child to full term. So many people watching this understand and feel you, and are going through these journeys as well. And I will just say, as someone, I am on the other side of it, where I have a very close friend who has just lost his brother, who is the closest person to him, to COVID. And I, for the first time, got to spend time with him one-on-one this past weekend, and there were no words. There are no words when you are holding someone who is grieving the loss of someone they loved so deeply that a piece of them is gone forever. And so you've experienced this kind of loss. And so for those of us who are in this community watching right now, who are trying to find the right way, or the most comforting way of holding space for people who are grieving right now, what do you say? What do you say to us? What do you say? What do you do?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Myself and then another close friend of mine, she has survived leukemia twice, almost died when she was in high school. We always say that the worst thing that you can do is nothing at all. Because while there were plenty of people who said lots of foolish things after my mom, she's in a better place, blah, that kind of shit. And I was like, you don't know where she is. I don't actually remember the specific, I know it happened, but like that doesn't stick with you. But what does stick with you are the people who you expect to show up for you who don't. There is no perfect thing to say. There is no perfect thing to do. What I always advise people is, think about your person, in your case, your close friend, and do something that feels authentic. After our pregnancy loss, like we were flooded with fancy bottles of wine and a really hard to procure bottle of bourbon that somebody knew was my favorite, and a box of fancy cheeses from Murray's Cheese in New York because people know I like that, and sweets from Milk Bar. Like people, tickets to a football game for Matt. People did the things that were like authentic and would be most helpful and supportive for the two of us, just knowing who we are. And so I think about what's going to be authentic, make sure you do something. And then, like I said, grief is a repeated experience of learning to live in the midst of a significant loss. So, make sure you continue to show up.
That's such great advice. The other day, actually, I think yesterday on the show, on the talk, we talked about grief, and we talked to a grief advocate as well, whose name is Steve Leader. He's a rabbi.
Yes, I'm reading his book right now. It's literally on my oh my God, so lovely.
So good. It's
I want to ask him to talk to me. I love him.
I mean, listen, I'll tweet at him to talk to you, because I think the two of you together in conversation would be what the world needs right now. Truly. As he was talking, I was like, oh my God, I have to connect him with Marisa. They need to know each other. But he wrote a book called The Beauty of What Remains. And he talked about how, he had counseled thousands of people through all different types of loss. And including, the death of people, loved ones. And he said, I thought I was doing a great job. He's like, I would give myself an A-. I thought I was doing a great job of it until I lost my father. And he talked about how it completely changed everything he knew about grief, everything he had been preaching, and all the things he was saying and doing completely turned it on its head. And when I asked him the question of what do you say, what do you do when someone you love dearly is going through the loss of someone that they love, he said something so similar. This is why I'm like, you guys are on the same page. But he said 3 words: just show up. And I'm telling you, same page. And he said something from his book that I found later that I thought was really helpful, and it does build on what you just said so beautifully. He said, be your most authentic self as you spend the last days or speak the last few words with the person who is dying. This also goes for when you're talking to someone who's just experienced death. This is no time to be something new or different.
Yeah.
Do not try to forge a new persona in the face of death. Just be you. If you are a hugger, hug. If you are a feeder, feed. If you are a joker, joke. If you are a gossip, dish away. Be with someone in death as you were in life. That is what the mourners and what a person who is dying wants and needs the most. Sit with them at home or in the hospital lounge and just be who you have always been. They want and need some normalcy, some comfort of the familiar. They need you, the authentic, real you.
Yes. And I mean, that's why I was sitting in my parents' bedroom, 13 years ago, putting information in Excel spreadsheets. Like, that is me, I am a list person. I don't even know how many lists I have in arm's length right now. I'm a little out of control. But that's that is who I am. And so, even though there are other things that I wish I had been able to do, I wish my 24-year-old self had known more about anxiety and therapy, and that I had more support for those things. So maybe I could have been a little more present with my mom, but I showed up the way I show up. I make lists and get shit done.
You sure do. That is who you are. I'm curious to get your perspective on the old stages of grief that we've been taught, and that's all over the internet. What's your take on that?
So my official take is thumbs down, but I also think that they have been very misconstrued. I mean, I read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross before my mom died because, again, I was trying to prepare for her death. What is lost in everyone constantly talking about those stages of grief is that she didn't write that book for you or for me to prepare or, kind of figure out how to move through your grief. She wrote that book originally for people who were terminally ill. And so it was more for them to prepare to die as opposed to for us to prepare to grieve. And not a lot of people talk about that. And so the fact that that fell away and all of a sudden we had this framework for grief that wasn't written for our grief, but for the dying person. I mean, it's really unfortunate. And, you know, one of the things that I learned the hard way is that like grief doesn't have a timeline. Like the various stages that she describes, you know, they are often things that come and go for people. Like there is that, you know, the denial and the anger and the bargaining and acceptance, you know, all of those things are common even for the griever, but it's not something that can be measured in the way that we think of when we think of things in stages.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that's so helpful for people because, you know, a lot of folks, when they experience grief for the first time, if you are a type A person, your inclination is to go, okay, am I doing this right? Let me read the books. Let me make sure I'm tracking along this appropriate timeline, and then I'm experiencing this the right way. There is no right and wrong way to experience grief. And I think it's really important for people to have permission to experience it as they are, like as they are experiencing it. Whatever waves are coming are your waves, and they're not. There's nothing wrong about them, and there's no right way to do this thing.
Exactly. Someone just said there's no blueprint for grief. I like that, Erica.
Yeah, that's it. I'm curious, what motivated you to share your story of loss with others?
So in the very early days, it was connected to a charity I started. You know, again, I am the productivity person. That is how I move through things. I do things and I build things and I share stories. And so originally it was to help support the growth of a breast cancer charity called the Pink Agenda that's still around, that I started in honor of my mom. And then I came to realize in more recent years that like grief is really hard for me to wrap my mind around still sometimes. And so the way that I figure out like what I'm feeling, whether it's grief or something related to grief, is to write. So like I write as a processing tool. Like I have to write in order to feel better most of the time. You know, like that is one of my primary coping mechanisms. Mm-hmm. And I knew about my infertility and my personal health issues for years before I shared them publicly. And it was hard and overwhelming. And, you know, I definitely felt exposed when we first did it. But one of the things that I realized is it was a lot to carry that grief silently. Mm-hmm. And, you know, with our pregnancy loss, if I didn't share what happened, you know, I couldn't figure out how to practically manage my life without telling people like what had happened to me and what I was experiencing. And so I've learned that, for me at least, opening up and sharing with people what's happening is a part of moving through the really painful things. Mm-hmm. One of the things I've been thinking about more recently, though, is, you know, we talk a lot about vulnerability. You know, it is one of our buzzwords these days, and we give a lot of cookies for people being vulnerable. And I get a lot of cookies for being vulnerable, but I want us to make sure that we think about who we enable to be vulnerable. You know, I think vulnerability is more of a privilege than we realize. And I think grief, and I think someone just said this, grief requires vulnerability. Like grief and really properly healing and moving through something do require vulnerability. But like, are we extending vulnerability to the same people that, you know, we're seeing die at higher rates from COVID? You know, the same people that we're seeing murdered in the streets by police officers. Like how do you make sure that vulnerability and the things that people need to heal are not a privilege, but are distributed equitably? That's something I've been thinking about.
So many places we could go with that. I kind of just want you to say more. Because you're right. Like, amen, preach, hallelujah. And I think vulnerability has become a buzzword that folks love to say that they're being vulnerable, and when certain people are vulnerable, they do get rewarded. I see fewer sincere expressions of vulnerability than I do hear I hear the term a lot.
Yes.
I don't
Yes.
see vulnerability practiced in the most sincere way. And I think true vulnerability is extremely powerful, and I do think that the space isn't always there for all of us. And the folks that do take up that space don't always do it in a way that's truly authentic or sincere. I don't know. There's a lot of performative allyship happening. And similarly, there's like these performative acts of vulnerability, but so maybe we can break some of that down, because I don't want to send the message that there's a right and wrong way to be vulnerable, and add more pressure to folks or more self-judgment. But I want you to say more so we can kind of tease out what we mean here.
So I guess what I had been thinking about, and this relates to me personally, how I moved through, or really how I struggled to move through the loss of my mother versus the way that I was able to lose through the loss of our pregnancy. And, the ways in which I felt comfortable sharing, like how painful it was, how hard it was, how confused and overwhelmed we were, that, like we still didn't have answers, like basically sharing that like very messy, raw, incomplete story. Like I have been, and I have to ask myself these questions because, I'm writing this book. Why wasn't I able to do that when my mom died? And some of it is emotional maturity, 25 versus I was 36 when we had our pregnancy loss. But I realized some of it is like, I'm in a place in my life right now where, as a Black woman in this country, I'm pretty much as safe as you can get. Like I am financially secure. I have my own businesses, plural. I have my book deal. I'm married to this great guy who also happens to be white, which is, helpful in this world. We have a nice house in the suburbs. Like my life is in a place where if somebody doesn't like something that I have to say, or, wants to make me feel badly about displaying vulnerability, I don't really have to care as much. Like I am safe. I am protected. I have space to be vulnerable right now. When I had just turned 25 and my mom died, I worked at a almost entirely white, like I'm talking like 99.9% white financial institution that was founded by, a senior member of the Bush family, like, President Bush back in the day. So pretty white conservative place. I was barely making it financially. It was my first like professional job. And it was a space where, I wouldn't even feel comfortable showing up with curly hair. So like, forget about showing up and talking about the extent to which I was really falling apart because my mom had just died. And so in thinking, I'm like, oh, wait, like, can everyone be vulnerable? Like, how can you be vulnerable when you don't have safety, when you don't have financial security, when, you maybe don't even have health insurance, like being truly honest and really vulnerable and putting stuff out there requires some support and resources that not everyone has access to.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That's more how I think about it.
That's right. When you talk about racism as another form of grief, I want you to break down what you mean by that.
Yeah. I think it is really hard to claim a country that has shown over and over and over again since we got here doesn't want us. Like for me, there's a lot of grief in that. Theoretically, I am a proud American. I'm someone who's served my country in government. I grew up being obsessed with our, political institutions. Like all I ever wanted was to come to DC and work in politics, and was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to serve in the Obama White House. But we know that there are people who like just don't want us. And that is hard. And like, you know, I don't know about you, but when I have had, so there's, you know, there's the like broader systemic racism, you know, white supremacy, these institutions that are just deeply, deeply flawed. But then there is also the personal instances of racism, you know, like being out in the world with a white husband and having people assume that like you're not together and like cut in between you when you're waiting like at a hostess stand. There is the going to Argentina on your honeymoon and having people ignore you in stores multiple times and like having to reckon with the fact that like, oh, like that just happened. You know, there's the not being served in bars or restaurants in the Midwest when we go back to Wisconsin. Like there are things, and I always think about it in the context of, and I can't remember his name, but the guy who was bird watching in Central Park and had, you know, the Karen
Cooper.
called the cops. Yes, yes,
Cooper.
thank you.
Help us out, folks, in the comments. I know y'all know. I know her name was Lisa Cooper.
And he was a Cooper too, but because I remember in the stories they kept saying they're not related. I was like, no shit.
Right.
So I always think when I think about the grief that exists in racism, I think about the institutions, but I also think about his story. You know, this guy was just out there trying to have a nice day and look at some birds. And he couldn't do that. Like what, like why shouldn't he be allowed to do that? And it's these ways in which we have to think differently about how we live and how we experience joy that I think, unfortunately, are full of grief. And then it's just made worse when you see things like George Floyd. Yeah, the trauma creates the grief. Someone just wrote that. I like that. Thank you.
And I also think it's the invisibility of our grief.
Yeah.
The invisibility of our experience, even as these things come up, right? Like our experience of the girl from last week, they called her the Soho Karen, I think.
Oh, yes.
Our experience of seeing that video, watching her tackle that little black boy to the ground because she thought he stole her phone that she left in an Uber, watching her disrespect Gayle King in an interview that she was lucky she even got the airtime for, watching her excuse her behavior and I mean all of these flagrant acts of white fragility, white supremacy, complete ignorance, lack of atonement, lack of accountability. I mean, like the list goes on and on. Our experience of watching a news story like that it goes so much deeper than what someone else who's never experienced all of those isms that we are seeing flagrantly on display. When you haven't been on the receiving end of that, you're watching that from a place of objectivity. Isn't that a shame? And you can move on with your day. For us, we are triggered every time we've encountered a woman like that. Yeah, that trauma that we've buried is coming back up, and it's invisible to our colleagues when we go to work or when we have to hop on a Zoom right after that. When we watched those men, those white people, those white supremacists, those Trump supporters raid our Capitol, when we saw the, you know, anti-Semitic symbols, and it's crazy. I mean, there is no way to watch that and not recall on a physical level every act of racism that you have personally experienced.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so and so even when we are seeing these things and we're talking about these things, we're coming, it's so deeply personal. Yeah. And it isn't for everyone. And that the awareness of that, when you go to work and you have a conversation with someone and the way that they react, and how, sometimes that's then you're re-triggered then again. And it's your experiences and your trauma are invisible to people who have never experienced it before. And it's even more isolating. And, you know, so I'm just curious, in this moment where all of these different types of traumas are intersecting, like it's like a full collision course. everything is at the highest velocity and the highest speed, and it's like, so everything that it makes us feel is even more intense. What coping mechanisms do you suggest? Because
Yeah,
Lord
it's a lot.
knows we need some coping mechanisms right about now.
It's a lot. So one thing that I will say that I hope we have gained from everything that we've experienced collectively this last year is that, like, we shouldn't feel like we have to hide our feelings anymore. You know, even if you are in a space where you don't feel like you can be completely vulnerable, find a way to take up some space. Like, your feelings deserve the space that they require. So in terms of coping mechanisms, the first thing, and I didn't understand how important this was until I started reading this book as a part of my research for my book. But I've always had therapists
What is
say that
that book?
it's called The Anatomy of Grief. And it is very dense and dry, and I was like geeking out over here. But one of the things that I think is really important for everyone is figure out how to identify what you're feeling and name it. And I didn't know that there was actual science behind this. So I'm just going to read this real quick, if that's okay, why this is so important. To name feelings, to give words either spoken or written to emotions that are overwhelming, controls the power of those emotions, harnessing them and lessening their intensity. So it sounds like a very minor thing, but if you are able to identify and name what you are feeling, that immediately gives it less of a hold over you. So like, that's always the first thing I say in terms of coping. I am someone who is a big, big, big believer in therapy. Between losing my mom, losing the pregnancy, the state of the world, whatever, I think I'm on like my sixth or seventh therapist. So if you're someone who's, thinking about it and you're kind of on the fence, let me be the person who like pushes you over to the other side, because I think it is really important. I think it can make a big difference. I also think, once you have identified what you're feeling, take some time to sit with those feelings and, really like own them and feel them, which seems really cheesy and a little weird, but that is the only way that they start to get better and go away, I find. I also made for myself a little index card that has resilience on the top of it. And I just put a list of things that I need to remember to do when I'm having a hard time. For me, I'm looking at my Peloton right now. I've tried to be better about meditation. I also have a really hard time remembering to reach out to people when I'm having a hard time. So I wrote on there, like, FaceTime one of your friends, get it together. You know what you need to do. So figure out what your things are and, make sure you're regularly doing them. I'm trying to spend less time online. So I got a beginner's embroidery kit. I used to do that as a kid. It's so nerdy, but it's something to do.
Those are great, 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 great tips. Those are great tips. I mean, is there anything that you would say, not that I don't love the duality of do's and don'ts or like good and bad, but are there things you would say probably not a good idea to do
Yeah, I
when
mean,
you're
don't leave
feeling
your house
triggered?
without a mask. No, I'm kidding.
That,
When you're feeling triggered, I disconnect from technology. And I know we're having this conversation on Instagram, but I just returned to Instagram yesterday because we were having this conversation today after a 2.5 week break. I have never seen the George Floyd video. I don't think I need to see it. So I think about what you're putting. Ooh, someone just said they love Chelsea on Peloton. Me too. Think about what you're putting into your body when you're feeling triggered. And that's, eating, drinking, but also what you're consuming. Like, what you're consuming matters. Go watch Bridgerton instead of doom scrolling.
doom scrolling.
Don't do it. We've
Listen,
all been there. Last Wednesday, I just kept being like, oh my God, like, with the TV on at the same time.
right. there's so much doomsday news that I will say, I think it was yesterday or the day before. Listen, who knows? It's COVID. Everything's blending together. But when I saw that video of the CNN reporter, Sarah Snyder, I believe is her name, breaking down on air, it knocked the wind out of me. It knocked the wind out of me. And I just, it was truly, I wrote this on, I think on Instagram yesterday, but it was truly like watching the proverbial emotional dam break. That like, it's like we're all holding so much in just to continue getting through our days, just to continue being productive. But seeing her break like that just broke something inside me, or just allowed what was broken to fully shatter. And then the emotion just poured out. I was at work when I saw it, and I mean, I cried my makeup off. And then I had to go on national television, and we were to talk about it. And I ended up crying on national television for the first time in my life. And I felt fine about it. I felt okay about it, because I realized in watching her cry, it gave permission to me to cry. And I felt like maybe we just need to cry too. You know, like,
I'm pro crying.
Right? Like, crying is so healthy. And I feel like we do so much of, what's it called when you're bypassing? Like we feel so much, so deeply, so intensely, and we gotta keep going with our lives, that we find ways to bypass the depth of what we're actually feeling, and we don't ever process it fully. So we're like trying to get to the joy so quick. We're trying to get to the, like, the, you know, the escape, you know, through whatever it is, whatever it's food, or it's Bridgerton, or it's, you know, whatever escape feels good for you. But ultimately, when she cried and I let it out, and then I watched other people cry, I was like, that actually felt like the right thing to do right now. Sometimes it's good just to actually sit in it, watch the thing, not saying watch the video that's going to trigger you, but sometimes confronting whatever it is that's going to make you confront your feelings. I find is really important, so that you can go to the depths of it, you know. I'm curious what your feeling was, your reaction was when you saw that video that went viral.
I totally started crying. And when it went viral, I still wasn't back on social media. So actually a friend sent it to me and said, you know, when I saw the book, which was very shit. And it was the same day that I was like deep in a chapter that's just really hard. You know, everything about this book is me revisiting the worst days of my life. Like, it's not fun. I write and I cry, and my husband comes to my office and he's like, "You okay?" I'm like, "Yep, I'm good. Got the tissues." Like, you know, this is just life right now. So I am all about the good cry. The shower is an excellent place to have like the very cathartic, aggressive cry. If you feel like you need to cry, you get that like sense in your chest, like, oh, I know that I need to cry, but you're just like not there yet. That's when I watch This Is Us. There is always something on that show that is going to like help you get to the other side and start crying.
Yeah, because sometimes we do need help. We built these walls up.
Yes.
And we've gotten so good at being okay when we're not okay that we don't even know what it is to feel not okay, to like let yourself not be okay. I have a hard time, tears have a hard time finding their way out of my body. Like, sometimes even when I'm crying, it's just like, it's like an internal cry. So when those tears came, I was in glam, literally, my makeup artist, and it was coming, and at first I was like, oh God, I can't mess up her makeup, and I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna let this go, and it was cleansing, and that's what they are here for. But yeah, watching lots of people, I saw a lot of hearts when you said when you need to cry, you just go watch This Is Us. A lot of people felt you on that, Marisa. Apparently that's what I need to go watch at the end of this long week.
Oh.
Well, listen, I want to ask you because I know how much your mother meant to you. Um, I wonder in these times, do you reflect on what your mom would say if she saw what was happening in the world? And what advice do you think she would have, and that she would give all of us if she could see both the state of the world right now, and also how you've been navigating since her passing?
Um, Gosh, that's a tough one. I mean, first of all, I think about her all the time, you know, again, to the repeated experience. Like when I'm feeling stressed out, like all I really want to do is just like put my head in my mom's lap and let her rub my back, and then I'll be better. So I think about that a lot during these times, and just, you know, really miss her and miss having her around to give advice and encouragement. Um, I mean, she would be thoroughly disgusted. She would be very upset. She would be very upset. You know, she was the epitome of like good Christian woman, when we say that in a good way. And I mean, she would be sad. And she would tell us that, you know, we need to take care of ourselves and we need to take care of each other. And, you know, if she knew everything that like Matt and I are carrying between COVID and the grief stuff and the work in racism and the infertility, you know, she would really push us to be kind to ourselves. You know, like I think everyone needs to think about how they can offer themselves some more kindness, because if you're not okay, you're not going to be able to give anything to help fix the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
So be good to yourself. And then she would feed us. So, or she would make me feed us, like one of the two.
Oh, you talk about being good to yourself, and I'm just curious, what does that look like for you?
So for me, one of the things that I instituted a couple weeks ago that I am trying to keep up with, and I'm going to say it here so that people can hold me accountable. I read in a book I'm reading about World War II that Winston Churchill took daily naps and daily baths. Daily baths is like over the top, but I have decided I am taking a 20-minute nap every day. And I always say, when I lay down, I'm like, there's no way I'm actually going to fall asleep. I have fallen asleep every time except for today, to be honest. And then I also am trying really hard to be mindful of both doing the things that I know make me feel better, like exercise, meditation, you know, early morning hip hop dance parties with like Cardi B on Spotify, and how I like speak to myself.
Yes.
You know, when I get to the end of the day and I'm ready, excuse me, to make dinner, and you know, there's 5 things on the to-do list that haven't gotten done, I'm just letting it go. Like, I'm
That's
not
right.
gonna be like, oh
So
my God, how
much.
could you not get that done? Like, no, like you're writing a book about your dead mom and working full time and like, stop. It's crazy. Like, we're just trying to survive the pandemic. Like, survival is enough right now. So be kind to yourself.
Yes, yes, preach, preach, preach. I mean, listen, I feel like we all need to get off of this Instagram app, and we all need to go do something that we know we need to feel better. And I'm curious for you guys who are watching, what is that? What is that? Like, let's define it, because I think just like you said, Marissa, which is such a great tip, it's, you know, you have to identify what you're feeling, write it down, but then in order to kind of, and then you have to sit with it, live with it, be in that feeling. Don't bypass it. But then when you are ready to like move to that step of like, let's lift myself out of this,
Yes.
we got to also identify that. And I love that you said you kind of have this list that you refer back to. So you guys, I want to know what yours are, so we can all start building our list and kind of pulling from each other's lists. Because I need it right now. When I get off, I don't know what exactly. It might be the bath. I like the bath suggestion. I know I'm hungry. I'm sitting by my fire. My fire is like how I alchemize anything. I have never really this is my first home. I'd never had a fire before. I never even had a bathtub in New York. You know what that New York life is like. I'm like,
Yeah.
baths? Who takes baths?
Oh,
Um,
they're so nice though.
but yeah, but I feel like because I'm a fire sign, I never really realized how connected I am to fire until I moved into this house. And every single night, this is how I end my day. I sit in front of this fireplace,
So nice.
and it helps alchemize everything. Just, you know, taking it and just transforming it into something that's something better, whatever I'm processing. So I love that people are sharing naps, baths, music, and mindfulness. A
Yes,
jasmine
music is a good
candle,
one.
yes, yes, jasmine candle. I want one of those. People say they drive down with their windows down, listening to music. I love that. I hope you guys are like saving some of these so that, and I'm gonna go back and look at them later. But how should we end this, Marissa? I mean, there's so much more we could talk about. Maybe we make this a series, but is there anything you want to share that we didn't get to?
Is there anything I want to share? I know I've said it already, but I really want to push folks to be good to themselves.
Mm,
I feel like before the insurrection last week, there was a lot of this, 2020 is over, like we've moved past the hard stuff,
mm,
and we haven't, like we're probably going to get past 400,000 dead Americans soon. Like that, like I can't wrap my mind around that number. And there will be other things that make this year hard. And so I just think it's really important to be good to yourself, because it's really the only way that you're going to be able to be good to anybody else.
mm.
Um, so yeah, that's my big thing. Figure out what your things are and how you're going to access them, and be disciplined about accessing whatever you need to be okay right now.
I want to ask you something quickly about your writing process, because you've said for
Yeah.
you, writing is a coping mechanism. And I think a lot of people relate to that. For folks who are trying to develop a writing practice in the midst of grief, and as you mentioned earlier, which I think so many moms who are watching will relate to, when you have a full-time job and children who now are in the house all the time, it's impossible. Life feels impossible. So then to carve out self-care time to write just seems like a fantasy for so many
Yeah.
people who are just trying to keep it together, just trying to, make ends meet right now. So what advice do you have about cultivating a writing practice that is cathartic and that it becomes a helpful coping mechanism, even when you have a really full life that feels
So,
overwhelming?
so I'm going to say two things on it. So first of all, in terms of the full life that seems overwhelming and finding a way to carve out time for yourself, I hate to bring it back to my mom, but she was not college educated. She worked full time, but always made it clear that she had a job because, she and my father wanted me and my sister to have access to as much as possible as kids. And that's why she worked, and she worked really hard. And even with two young kids, she always had things that she did for herself. And then once she got sick, she still had things she did for herself. When she couldn't leave the house anymore, someone would come to the house and like do her hair and do her nails. And, before she became like very, very sick at the end, she was determined to still find a way to exercise. And so, I remember taking her to aqua aerobics that was very clearly for seniors. And she was, the youngest person in there, trying to protect her hair that she had just got done at home, doing that because it was the only thing she could do with MS and breast cancer. So like, I get it, it is hard, but I think it's important to find a way, not only for yourself, but like for your kids, for your spouse, because I just think we all show up better when we feel more full. And we're not going to get there in, a perfect way, but think about the way you feel when you first get back from a vacation. Like if you could give yourself just 5 or 10% of that on a regular basis, like you will survive this pandemic in a much better way. So like try and figure it out. On my end, about a year ago, someone who I follow, I do not remember who, I need to figure it out, did a post about this book called The Artist's Way.
Mm-hmm.
And I like, okay, I'm like, have you heard of it? So it is a little woo
Life
for sure,
changing.
but absolutely, like, I have a book deal. Like it, like I didn't have that a year ago, and I did all of the assignments and all the things that they say.
Did you, I
And
want to know, even
yeah, go ahead.
like a year ago, did you call yourself a writer? Had you even owned that you
No,
are a
no,
writer?
absolutely not. No, no, because a
And now
year
you have a book
ago,
deal.
yeah, yeah,
That's a big
yeah.
deal. I just want to celebrate
Thank
that.
you.
People spend their whole lives getting to a point of being able to say, to claim what they are, who they are. And so to be able to say
Right.
you're a writer is a huge accomplishment in of itself. To create the practice is an even bigger accomplishment. And then to land a book deal.
Thank you. Thank you. It's all happened so fast that I kind of
They're
lose sight
asking
of it
for
a
the
little
name
bit.
of your book. So
Oh,
we should remind them. Grief is Love is the name of her book. And when does it come out, by the way? Sorry to interrupt you.
April 10th, 2022. We have an
Oh,
official
okay, we
date.
got a while.
Yeah, we have a minute. It feels like a while to everybody, I feel like, except for me. But anyway, the artist way, one of the things that they ask you to do, or that Julia Cameron asks you to do in this book, is to write every morning. And the assignment is you're just supposed to write 3 pages longhand, write whatever you want, whatever's kind of in your head, and move on with your day. So like if you're scribbling 3 pages, quickly, it really doesn't take very long. Like it's literally whatever is in your brain. It can be a dream you remember from last night. It can be the annoying thing that your kid did. It can be like, how great your husband is, whatever. But just get stuff out. And she believes that by like getting the kind of more random stuff out of your head, that then leaves space for more creativity and the kind of writing that you would do for the world. So it's 3 pages a day. that's
Three
that's
pages a
what I
day.
yeah, yeah.
3 pages a day. I see people in the comments right now committing to the 3 pages a day. I see people right now claiming that they're a writer. Like
Do
let me
it.
just put this out there. I'm a writer and I love it so much. 3 pages a day.
You can do it. Like just
I
do
think
your
we
three
can do
pages a
that.
day. I'm telling you, it makes a difference. And I personally, I end my 3 pages with like a prayer for the day, because like that is important to me, and it, is a part of my spiritual practice. So I do 3 pages and a prayer. If you want to get extra with it, there you go.
3 pages in a prayer. I love that. I will end on sharing my little practice since you shared yours so generously. 3 pages in a prayer is what Marisa does. One thing that Jonathan has done, Jonathan's my husband. It still feels weird to say it. It's like been 7 months. It's still like, Jonathan has piano in prayer every Mondays on IG Live at 5:30 our time, PST, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. Actually, you're on the East Coast. I forgot.
Yeah.
So piano and prayer, and he does this every Monday, and it is such an incredible experience to go on there and just see people praying for each other, and
Oh, I love that.
to watch just how he's just led by the Spirit. He doesn't ever prepare what he's going to play. He just lets it flow, and it's incredibly beautiful. And that's become something I really enjoy tapping into, because it's so funny how even by like Monday end of day,
Oh,
sometimes you're like, she has had it. Like she has already had it. And we are only on day one of this work week. What is going on? So it's a nice way to recenter. But my practice, which was recommended by my, like, I don't even feel like calling her my therapist because she feels like so much more than that to me. But her name is Yadi, and I should drop her account here, but she's a shaman, and she does a lot of
oh
her
wow.
work is like utilizing Native American practices. So maybe I'll do a live with her another time. But
I
anyway,
love that.
she has me setting an intention for the day as soon as I wake up. And the way that she defines intention is she says, ask yourself the question, how do I want to feel today? What is the core desire of
Oh,
how I
that's
want to feel
interesting.
today? And then I have set 3 alarms throughout the day and on my phone. and I have 3 appointments on my calendar for those same times. One is at 11:11, one is at 2:44, and the other one is at 4:44. There's some sort of numeric, some reason why those are the times, but nonetheless, 3 times a day, there's a self check-in where I check in with my intention and say, how am I doing on that intention? How am I feeling right now? Do I feel that thing? And if not, what do I need to change to be able to recommit to and realign with my core desired feeling for the day? And I'm telling you, it sounds like a little bit woo-woo and it sounds sort of simple, but having that practice actually has shifted my perspective and my attitude throughout every single day that I've done it so far, and helped me in the way I show up at this new job. It's been really powerful. So I hope that is helpful to one of you out there, even just one of you.
I love that.
It's nice to be interrupted by a positive thought. You know, like throughout our day, we can get hijacked by so many negative things, negative news, negative thoughts, negative self-talk, negative interactions with people, or disappointment with yourself and how you handled something. But it's so nice to have these like 3 positive interruptions on my calendar, on my phone, which is also like a trigger fest so much of the time. So to be interrupted by like, oh wait, how am I feeling right now? Am I still feeling grateful? Or have I slipped into lack of, okay, I need to realign. Let's get back. So that's my little practice.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, these little things really can make a difference. I also have a daily gratitude practice. You know, like, what are 3 things that you're thankful for today? Because even on really bad days, there's always something.
Absolutely. And again, it sounds simple, but I think when you actually do it and make it a part of your days, it changes your approach to your life. So anyway, Marisa, I could keep you on forever. We could just go on and on. But I think we all should get off the internets, and we should all do one good thing for ourselves, something healing. And I just want to say thank you so much, Marisa. You are such an incredible light, and your smile alone seriously lights up the whole world. But like, this interaction has just made me feel so much better. I did have a rough day, but I appreciate you taking the time, sharing your experience with us, sharing your genuine vulnerability with us, sharing your story about the loss of your mom and the loss of your pregnancy. Like, you're a gem, and this is just the beginning of this new journey that you're on. I'm so happy for you, and I hope you guys will follow her. I dropped her tag there. It's Marisa Renee Lee. Follow her journey, follow her writing. She writes for Vogue. She writes about grief for Vogue. I shared a couple of her headlines in a previous IG Live that dropped off, but a couple just to kind of wet your whistle so you could go and Google her and read her work. She wrote How to Celebrate the Holidays in the Midst of Grief. How relatable is that? So many of us were dealing with that. How I Learned to Find Joy in the Midst of Grief. She also wrote a story called I Work in Racial Equity. My husband is working on COVID. Here's how we're coping. So go check out her work, guys. And somebody said, I want to suffer.
Oh.
This is, and honestly, I know we were about to wrap up, but I kind of, part of me wants to just quickly have you address that, because we did kind of, I don't want this to be a bypassing session where it's just like, say 3 things you're grateful for, set good intentions, take a bath.
Yeah. So
what about those of us who deal with grief in a way where we don't feel good about feeling good. We feel guilty actually about feeling joy. We feel guilty about moving on with our lives. Like, and we actually want to suffer. We feel we deserve to suffer because the other person's not here, or for whatever reason. Can we address that? I know it's like a dark detour.
No, not at all. Not at all. I have been in the deep, dark parts of my book this week, where I had a lot of guilt. I wrote at one point, like, guilt is like grief's companion or grief's friend or something along those lines. I think sometimes, at least I experience this feeling that the less sad I was, like that was going to make me like further away from my mom, like almost like this sadness is justified because of how much we loved each other and she's not here anymore.
Right.
And I eventually got to a place where, I realized some of that sadness would always be there. And sometimes it would be like really deep and really heavy. And I should embrace that. But that it's also okay to, have days that are full of joy and happiness. That doesn't mean that like you should gloss over the hard parts or, being in a deep place. I also think so. For instance, I feel exhausted about always having to feel grateful. One of the things that I talk about in the book, twofold. Do not let anyone judge you for how you're feeling. So, like, if you are feeling exhausted, like, that is okay. Maybe you just need to get some rest and like take a break. Like that's like there's nothing wrong with any of these feelings, good, bad, or otherwise, as long as you're figuring out how to move through them. And I also say, like, whether it's you or someone else, like, don't should your feelings. If you're feeling exhausted, don't feel like, oh, but I should be grateful. Or if you're feeling sad about losses that are not, death related losses, and, other people are dealing with human beings that they've lost, that doesn't mean that like you can't still feel grief as well. So like, don't should your feelings away. Don't minimize your feelings. And you can hold more than one feeling at a time. Like I was devastated at my mom's funeral, but I also laughed because this woman we hired to sing at the funeral was terrible, and it was kind of funny. Like I can remember me and my cousin being like, "Oh my God, like that lady is awful." And then, soon after that, I was falling apart and like taking Xanax because it was really hard. So you can do all of the feelings, and sometimes you do them side by side, sometimes you don't. But yeah, don't let anybody should you, don't let anybody judge you, and don't judge yourself. Like there's no point. It's not going to help.
Yeah. The friend of mine who, every time I even think about it, it makes my heart so heavy, but he lost his brother to COVID in a really sudden way, really sudden. And he found him.
Oh, Jesus.
And it was his best friend in the world. When we finally got to like be together and I could just hold space for him, one of the things that he said he felt was just, I asked him, is there, because he said he's on this emotional roller coaster where it just sometimes just hits him really hard out of nowhere, and sometimes it's unpredictable. And I said, is there a pattern? Are you noticing a pattern for like what creates an environment in which you become emotional, or when when it hits it on the head? And he said, it's when I find myself in moments of beauty. He's like, it's when I see something beautiful and I feel like he'll never get to see that. And and it makes him feel like he's not sure he doesn't even know if he wants to experience beauty anymore because his brother can no longer. And he's like, it's not exactly guilt. Like guilt isn't the exact word for it, but he just said it's hard to describe. I feel like he said he feels like part of him is gone. Part of him can't even feel the depths of something good anymore because part of him is gone. He feels robbed. So the sun might be shining, but it doesn't feel the same. Or the flowers might be beautiful, but they don't hit the same. It's just not. It's not the same without his person on this planet that he did life with. And God, it was. I thought it was just such an eloquent, real, raw explanation of what grief feels like for him. So I'm just curious what I see some people in here are saying they're feeling that way as well.
I mean, those early days, weeks, months, and then, the early years when you're doing all of these firsts without your person. I mean, it's devastating. To this day, like I said, 13 years in February. My mom died on the 28th, and she died at 5:37 p.m. And I have still not gotten to a place where like I can be somewhere for like dinner that day. Like I can't, like I can't do it. Like even if I have what seems like a good day, we usually try and make some kind of plan together. Matt and I, go get a massage, like do something that's like comforting and nice. When like 5:15, 5:30 hits, like just a mess, like absolutely lose it, fall apart. So like that early heaviness, it's hard. I'm not surprised that he feels this way. And like I said, I think the most important thing you can do is just continue to show up for him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Man, people are sharing their stories. Somebody said that they lost their mother and they feel like a part of their identity is gone. They said, I can't explain it, but it
That
feels
makes
like a part
perfect
of my
sense to
identity.
me. That makes perfect sense to me. That's the thing. Like no one can prepare you for what life is like on the other side of a significant loss. And that's why I say like it is a repeated experience of learning how to live with that loss. Like I don't think, almost 13 years in, I don't think it's something that goes away. Like I could be wrong. I'll keep you posted, but so far it hasn't disappeared.
And I'm curious for people who
Mm.
are going through loss for the first time and they feel like a piece of them is dead. They feel like there's a hole in their heart that will never be filled. What hope do you have to offer, or what's the real that you want to give them now being on the other side? As you say, 13 years in, there's some parts of it that you say you still feel every single day, but do certain parts become not easier, but does it get better? What kind of hope can you share?
So I just want to say, someone says, everyone says, remember the hard times you had with them, but I can't help but think about the times they will not have. And I think,
Yeah.
I think that like hits the nail on the head for me of like, why I think about grief the way that I think about it. Like you have to keep figuring out how to recalibrate like the plans and the hopes that you had for different things,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not the same without this person. I will not tell people that like the hole in your heart is going to go away or somebody else is going to fill it, because that's actually not what I believe. I think that absence stays with you. And I think what does happen is, if you commit to tending to that grief and acknowledging it and giving it the space and the time that it needs and giving yourself the space and the time that you need to heal, it does get better. Like I am here to say, and I have lots of friends. I have a couple of friends who've lost parents who've put comments in the chat. Like it does get better. It will always be hard though. And it will always be there.
Mm-hmm. They said, Morel Adkins says that grief is love with nowhere to go.
And I actually think that
Beautiful.
grief can also be like an active expression of love. Like I still love my mom in the present tense, and I
Yes.
haven't seen her, since February 28th, 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Someone just said the void will never be filled, but the numbness does subside.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in these comments.
There is. Somebody said they had to find a new meaning for life. Um,
Yeah.
I see people here are saying they feel lost, and they're currently searching. This is real, I think um, we don't have a lot of spaces where we can just be this real and just
No,
say
unfortunately.
in the present, I don't feel like I don't know what to do in the present. I feel lost. Like I feel like Instagram has become a place where we come to tell our like,
completed story.
Yeah, we look back, we reflect back on from a triumphant place, right? But we don't really say today is a hard day for me, and I don't know what to do right now. And so I did want to I wanted to make sure that people who aren't doing okay can come here and know that it's okay to not be okay, to
Yes.
hear from you, to see you and to see your bright, beautiful smile, but to also know that you are somebody who is still in a grief process, and that you've picked up some tools and you have some tools to share. So we will be saving this. A lot of you are asking for us to save it. We'll save it. And maybe we'll do a series. And I would love to see Marisa do a series with different folks. Maybe you can go live every week. Just putting it out there, just putting it into the universe.
Oh man, I mean, it's hard, but I think these conversations are really important. And I just want to say thank you to the person who said that they are feeling lost, and to everyone who's being really honest and really vulnerable, because I know it's hard. So thank you. I really appreciate it. I want to say thank you to the folks on Elaine's team and Brendan on my team who got us together very quickly at the last minute. I love them and I'm grateful to them. And a shout out for folks who are interested in learning more about book writing. My editor, Krishan Trotman, is on here as well. You should give her a follow.
What's drop her handle in there. Okay. Because I at least know one person, if you're still watching, Tracy, my best friend since 7th grade, who's going through she's going through a transitional phase in life. And I'm telling you, this woman is a writer. And I saw that she's setting up her writing desk, and I want her to commit to writing those 3 pages a day. Anybody that's on here who's going through anything, whether you consider yourself a writer or not, whether you think you're a good writer or not, I hope that you guys will commit to the 3 pages a day. And then we'll check back in. We'll see how it's going. All right, guys. I am so grateful for you, Marisa. I'm so grateful for all of you guys who are tuning in right now. I'm just giving you guys so much love. And I hope you do something good for yourself after this live. And we will see you soon. Thank you, Marisa.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Bye, everyone. Good night.